Good morning. I'm Velvet with Quality Sewing and Vacuum, and I'm a sewing educator here at one of our 11 locations in the Pacific Northwest. And thank you for joining me this morning for How Do I? So, do you struggle with those annoying thread nests or maybe have difficulty adjusting your tension on your sewing machine? Well, today I'm going to walk you through some tips and tricks to make this a little easier for you. So, thread nests can be caused from a variety of different factors. And one of the most common things we see wrong is that your machine is not threaded correctly, and that can include both the top thread and your bobbin thread. So let's go through the top thread threading. So what I like to do when I'm threading my machine is I will make sure that I have a nice long tail of thread to work with to get started. And I'm going to follow my threading path. There's 2 points on here that can be a real problem if you don't get them right. So we're going to follow our first section here at the top, which is this white hook. And then down here at the bottom where this disc is at, this is your tension disc. And these are where your tension discs are located inside of the machine. When the presser foot is in the up position, like I have it here, that means that your tension discs are open so the thread can get in between. If the presser foot is in the down position, that means that the discs are closed and the thread cannot get in between it. It's essential to make sure that your presser foot stays up when threading. So now, once I put my thread between the two discs here, I like to hold from the top and from this section here, and I kind of gently pull as I thread it to ensure that the thread goes between our discs. Then we're going to go up the white hook, and here's our next section where we usually find issues. So this here is called your take-up lever, and the take-up lever ensures that the thread goes up and down in your fabric. We have to make sure that the thread gets attached to the take-up lever. It's always going to come from the right-hand side of the lever back down the left, and it has to get caught here on this hook. Some models of machines, the hook does not come up out of the top and it stays down inside. It doesn't hurt to use things like a flashlight to kind of look in there to see if you're getting it on there correctly, but other models will see out the top. So now I'm going to go ahead and take the thread and come down, and then I'm going to use my needle threader here just to thread my needle as normal. Always make sure your needle is in its highest position. You can do that 2 ways. On this model here, we have the ability to do it with the hand wheel on the side, or you can also utilize your up-down needle button. Once your top thread is threaded, I make sure that it's underneath my presser foot and then at the back of the machine, so my tail doesn't get caught in anything. Next, we want to make sure that our bobbin thread is in correctly as well. So depending on the style of machine that you have is going to determine what direction your bobbin goes into its case. So you're going to remove the case cover, and a lot of the time these covers actually have threading directions right on them on how to place your bobbin in there. But if not, you'll want to refer to your manual for this. This is a top loading style bobbin, so that means that our bobbin actually gets dropped into the case, which means that our bobbin always needs to go in going counterclockwise, or if it helps you remember, I think of the letter P. So the thread tail here is going to be on the left side of our bobbin. If you have a front loading style, so there is a case that comes out the front side here, typically that's going to go in going clockwise. So I'm going to set my bobbin into my case here. Then I like to make sure that I have a couple inches of thread tail to work with, and I'm going to follow the steps on my bobbin case cover here. The thread is going to sit into this tiny little notch at the bottom of the case, and once the thread is in the notch, I like to place my finger on top of the bobbin so it does not spin. This ensures that I can give the thread a little bit of a tug when I'm pulling it up towards the top of the machine, ensuring that my thread is in the bobbin case tension correctly. Now I can put the cover back over the top, and I can pull my tails up. So some modern versions of machines, you don't have to pull your tails up to get it to start sewing for you. But if you're noticing that you're having issues with your machine, like your thread nests or tension issues, it does not hurt to pull your bobbin thread up to the top so it will sew correctly. So what I'm going to do is use my hand wheel here on the side, move it towards myself so my top or my needle goes down into the bottom of the machine. And then I'm going to gently pull on my top thread to pull the bobbin thread up through my presser foot. So at this point, I either like to use my fingers to grab it, or a pair of tweezers is a great option too. Now I'll make sure that both of these threads are under the foot here and then to the back of the machine. After this, I would sew a test. Make sure that you're always testing on a piece of fabric that's similar to whatever you're using for your project. Some machines also like it when you hold the two tails at the back of the presser foot to get the stitch started. You don't always have to do this, but if you're running into issues, it doesn't hurt. Once you've finished stitching and trying out your test here, you want to ensure that your stitches are both nice and evenly spaced on both the top and the bottom of your fabric. If you're still encountering thread nests after this, you may want to try a couple other things. So the next thing that I like to try is changing my needle. So using a nice new sharp needle is really important, and we recommend changing your needle every 8 to 10 hours of sewing or every 2 to 3 projects, whatever is easier for you to remember. Also, using the right needle for the job is important. Just like you wouldn't use a hammer to put in a screw, you're not going to use the wrong needle for the wrong fabric. So here I have a variety of different types of needles. So this pack here from Foff, these are stretch needles. And I also have here some jeans or denim needles from Class A. These are just 2 different brands that we carry here at Quality. And the great thing about these needles is they work in the majority of sewing machines. The other nice thing about them is that they will usually have descriptions on the back of their packaging that will tell you exactly what these needles are for. So there's no second guessing yourself. We carry them in these great little tins as well. And these are a variety pack, so they get you started with a lot of different styles of needles so you can't make the wrong choice.
Question?
Yes, absolutely. All right. Will this also stop skipped stitches? Using the right needle absolutely can stop your machine from doing skip stitches. One good example is when you're using stretch fabric. I notice a lot of the time if I'm using the wrong needle for a stretch fabric, I do get skip stitch issues. So using a stretch or a ballpoint needle, depending on how thick and heavy your fabric is or how much stretch it has, will determine what type of stretch needle I use, but that can absolutely help your skip stitches, yes. Great question. All right, so when you look at a package of needles, you'll also notice that there's sizes to them too. So the stretch pack that I have here is a 90-14. So the 90 refers to European sizes, while the 14 refers to US sizes. So it really doesn't matter which one you choose to follow. The only thing that you need to know is that the larger the number, the larger the needle. And I typically use larger needles for thicker fabrics. Most of my sewing, I'm using a 90-14 or an 80-12. They're kind of right in the middle and they hit that sweet spot of being a great needle for most projects. Your needles do dull out pretty fast, and ensuring that you're using a nice new sharp needle can absolutely prevent your machine from having those horrible thread nests we all hate. Now, if changing your needle does not work, then you may want to consider the thread that you're using. So thread brands are not all created equal, and a lot of people don't realize that certain threads are stronger than others and last longer than others. So an average thread lifespan depends on the type of thread that it is and how it's being taken care of. So keeping your thread away from dust and debris and keeping it away from the sun can make them last a lot longer. But things like your polyester threads are going to last a lot longer than your cotton threads. Cotton thread is a natural fiber, so it tends to wear out a little bit faster. I use these depending on what type of fabric and project that I'm going for and what strength I'm looking for. Thread also has a size to them as well. So there's a few options that you can use for kind of standard weight threads. 40, 50, and 60 weight are kind of the sweet spot in the middle there that you'll use for most of your projects. But anything with thread that is a smaller number is going to be considered a thicker thread. So they're opposite of needles. So if we're talking about things like a 12 weight thread, that's going to be considered a more heavy thread. Well, an 80 weight thread is fine and considered very, very light thread. So for certain projects, I will use a lighter weight thread, like an 80 weight for things like embroidery, which I'll talk a little bit about later. Or I'll use things like a 12 weight thread if I'm looking for a more decorative look to use in a serger or to give it a heavier stitch on a sewing machine. So which thread you use for your project will also determine how those stitches turn out as well. You want to make sure that the threads are balanced as well. So most of the time when I'm sewing, I'm using the same top thread as my bobbin thread, but there will be some instances where those are going to be different, so the balance is correct for your project, including embroidery. Next is your bobbin. So if going through those steps don't work, make sure you check your bobbin thread as well. So like I was saying, using the same type of thread on the top and bobbin can ensure a better stitch, but sometimes it won't. Sometimes you need to have different weights of threads on the top and bottom. So you can always wind your own bobbins with whatever thread that you're using, but you can also use something called a pre-wound bobbin. And pre-wound bobbins are a great option because they have about 3 times as much thread on them than what your machine can wind. But you are going to be limited to the colors that are available with our pre-wound bobbins, as well as the types of thread that are available. So most pre-wounds come with embroidery thread. We do have a couple options that have standard polyester or cotton as well, but like I said, color is going to be limited. Now with these pre-wound bobbins for embroidery, the thread weight on them is usually an 80 weight, which is that very fine weight thread. And it's intended to be that way, especially when you're doing machine embroidery, because you want this bobbin thread to stay underneath the project where it belongs so it doesn't pull up to the top. That's where one of those instances that having the weights differ is really important.
Question?
Absolutely. What's our question here? Can you use 12 weight thread in most machines? Yes, it usually means that you have to use a little bit of a bigger needle, because our bigger needle means that we have a bigger eye so you can get the thread through that needle. But yes, you can use 12 weight on most threads, or most machines, sorry. All right. Next is that thread balance. So talking about our thread tension here is another really important thing. I think a lot of people get very scared when they hear tension on their sewing machines, or automatically assume that if something is going wrong, like thread nest, that it has something to do with tension. I highly recommend going through the first couple steps that I talked about here before you get into touching the tension on your machine. Now you have 2 spots that you can adjust the tension. One is going to be the top thread tension, which is usually controlled by a dial on the front of our machine located right here. Some machines that are more computerized will actually have a screen that will have it listed on your machine somewhere, usually in the settings where you can adjust your tension. And the tension setting may be different depending on what model that you have. So the standard tension for the majority of machines is usually about a 4. Some models it's closer to 5, some closer to 3. It just depends on what machine that you own. And most of the time I leave this alone. But if I am going to adjust this, if you go to a higher number of tension on your machine, you are tightening it. If you go to a lower number, you are loosening that tension. And this only controls the top tension. It has nothing to do with your bobbin case. For your bobbin case tension, that is adjusted by a small screw located on the case itself. And there is no number system associated with this screw. It's just lefty-loosey, righty-tighty when you're going to be tightening or loosening it. I do recommend that if you choose to adjust your bobbin case tension, to have a separate bobbin case to do that on. Otherwise, it can be really tricky to get it back in the right spot. But that is also why a lot of models of machines, especially the ones that have machine embroidery, will give you a separate bobbin case that has the tension set correctly to be used for embroidery. So that could be another issue too if you have run into problems with your thread nest on embroidery specifically. All right. Another option that you can do is you can clean your machine. So keeping your machine clean is super important. So dusting it out periodically, we recommend doing that every 8 to 10 hours of sewing, just as often as you're changing your needles. And you can do that with the small brush that comes with your machine. You can also use things like mini vacuums. This here is our Sonic Power mini vacuum. It's rechargeable, super easy to use. It has these great little attachments that fit super well into your machine. You can even use it for other types of cleaning, like cleaning your dryer, keyboard, anything you can think of. But this is a great option to get those little dust bunnies that like to live underneath your machine. So when you do clean it, you want to make sure that you're cleaning it in the bobbin case area. So you'll be removing the needle plate You'll be taking out the bobbin case and then dusting underneath the bobbin case. That's usually where all of the fuzz loves to live. And some threads will actually make your machine dirtier faster. So things like cotton thread tend to be a little bit more linty, and you do have to dust out your machine more frequently when that happens. So real quick here, back into that thread tension. So when you're looking for a good stitch, you want to make sure that the threads on both the top and bottom side of your fabric look nice and even. You want to make sure that you can see little individual stitches on both the top and bottom side of your fabric. So if you notice that when you stitch, there is something wrong with the top thread, that usually indicates something wrong with your bobbin, versus if there's something wrong with the bottom side of your fabric, that usually indicates something wrong with the top thread. Most of the time when I'm having this problem, I'll go back to the very beginning of what I was talking about here, and I'll rethread first, and then I'll work my way down those steps to ensure that everything goes correctly. Now, if you notice that your machine is still giving you problems even after going through all of those steps, I highly recommend considering getting your machine serviced. We have 11 locations here in the Pacific Northwest, and you can bring your machine into any one of our locations and we can take a look and diagnose those problems for you and have it send your machine up to service to get it looked at. If you do not live here in the Pacific Northwest, make sure to check in with one of your local machine dealers or service centers, and they can definitely help you with that. It's recommended to get your machine serviced at least once a year because it does keep your machine running for many, many years. There's going to be dust and things that you can't get to inside of your machine that could be causing those issues that you're having. All right. Do we have any other questions for today? That's great. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today for How Do I. Make sure to follow us here on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the social media, and check us out next Tuesday for another segment of How Do I. Have a great week.